All right, Claudia North, welcome to, the podcast, and it's great to have you on the show. I'm really looking forward to having a chat and getting to know you, and also, maybe sharing some of your expert advice around working with e-commerce businesses and so forth. So thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Ez. Really looking forward to joining you on the podcast and really appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. So we'll get straight into it. Could you tell us a bit about yourself, like for viewers that don't know who you are, and then also, your journey so far into this business? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I've been marketing for 30 years, which is scary to say. It's actually 30 years since I started my degree in marketing. I just realised this year. I did it in, majored in marketing, so it's certainly been my passion and my extended career. After uni, I did start in the big end of town, so I did work in financial services for almost a decade, all in marketing roles. I did find after sort of being at that end of town, I hadn't had experience in agency land, and a real obviously key component of marketing and marketing strategy is the advertising and media component. So I then went on and worked in a number of agencies. So I was in like a media agency, advertising agency, so ran the creative process, and again for some quite big brands, and then ended up in a content marketing agency where I had a team of developers, and it was all in the digital side of things. So we built sort of over the top digital channels for brands around the globe, and also did all of the content. So that was all, a fantastic experience in terms of really having the breadth of marketing from branding, product development, etc. But then I went on to have children. So after I had my first child, I realised that there wasn't a whole lot of information out there for mums when they finish breast or bottle feeding and how they sort of transition their child onto solid food. So this is where I sort of had my first soiree into becoming a solopreneur and actually starting my first e-commerce business. So that was about 18 years ago. And I've since sold that business, but my product still exists. It's in 30 countries around the world now, which is exciting to say that people are still using it and appreciating it. And that was exciting because I was able to get my product into Woolworths, and I actually built my own website 18 years ago, which I still don't really remember or know how I could have possibly done that.
Amazing. So that's just for the viewers, so that's the Mumi and Bubi brand. Is that right?
That's right. Mumi and Bubi, yeah, solid starter kit. So yeah.
Cool. So could you tell us a bit about that business, the Mumi and Bubi? Like, what were you selling?
So basically, I wanted to provide a one-stop shop kit so that when your kids or your babies are sort of moving on to solid foods, what kind of foods are good for them, why it's good for them, in terms of nutrients, vitamins, all of that kind of stuff, quantities. And what I found at the time was that a lot of mums were freezing their food in ice cube containers, and when you do that, the food actually gets freezer burn, and it actually reduces the vitamins and the quality of the food and the vegetables, etc. So I ended up designing a kit which was BPA plastic free. It had a lid. It had the right proportions for babies when they sort of it's starting to come off breast or bottle feeding. And then I also wrote a book which was certified by a pediatric nutrition, just really going, more into the education side of, food and quantities and, all of that sort of stuff.
Fantastic. So you really niche down into this industry and found a target audience and
absolutely.
And how big did the business grow? Like, do you have any sort of numbers?
So I did it was interesting because I actually did some market research myself. I went out to a baby expo and interviewed a whole lot of mothers there, and what was great about that was I was pitching my product into Woolworths, and I kept sort of knocking on the merchandiser's door in that particular area, and she literally said, "Okay, you've got 20 minutes, next week before I go on holidays. Come in and show me what you've got." So I went in, and at that stage I had the research, and I sort of mocked up the brand and went in, met with her, and she said, "Okay, I want your product on the shelves in 6 months." So I had 6 months to actually build up the whole product. I manufactured it overseas in China, write the book, etc. So I did sell it through Woolworths and through about 40 to 50 independent baby stores throughout Australia. I
Hmm.
then sold it into New Zealand and South Africa. I actually got the book translated into French and Italian. And at that stage, then I actually decided to sell the business because I found like I was pretty lonely. I was the only one, in the business doing, the marketing, the distribution, the ordering, the accounting, everything. And
Mm.
my passion and enjoyment really was in the, product development, getting it into a word, doing the website, the branding, all of that kind of stuff. I really love pioneering sort of new stuff. But I think once it got into sort of the day-to-day business, it just wasn't really my thing. So I decided to sell the business and move on to other things.
Okay, and yeah, that's amazing. It's an amazing experience as well. So, and congratulations. I'm assuming you built it into a seven-figure business. Is that
Oh
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
easy. Look, as I said, I looked it up online, a couple of years ago, and it was sold in 30 countries. It had like thousands and thousands of 5-star reviews. So yeah, it would be a significant business,
Yeah,
digital
yeah,
business today. Mm.
yeah. And what would you say is the biggest challenge you face in that business? Like, what was the share
Yeah,
with us the toughest moment for you?
yeah. Look, I think I mean, as I said, I love trying, new things and taking on challenges. But I think what I wasn't expecting was not being part of a team and just really feeling like there was no support for small business owners. Like I was, in marketing and at least I could do the marketing component, but it just felt really, really, lonely. Back then we didn't have communities and like social. We didn't have, Facebook groups and, or you can jump online if you've got a technical issue and you can just chat with somebody. Like it was dial up internet and, phone calls and, getting out and going into stores and visiting, baby stores to say, would you stock my product? So I think I definitely would have underestimated just that loneliness, not really having somebody to sort of motivate you and inspire you. And it was, and I
Mm.
also had, by that stage I had three kids at home, so I was, I was a full-time mum but also running my business. So yeah, so that's probably the biggest challenge, I'd say.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, look, I can relate to it, not in terms of having 3 kids, but I do have one son.
Sweet.
But I started my business, the agency, about 15 years ago, and I totally agree with you. Like, back then when we had our business, we didn't have the support network that you can tap in today, especially
Mm,
for a business owner.
yeah,
Now you can go online. You can get support around legal, you can get accounting, content, marketing, branding, even other entrepreneurs, like I think the entrepreneurial culture and conversation around entrepreneurs and especially around online businesses has exploded. And
yeah,
there's so much community to tap into now. Whereas,
yeah,
when we were starting businesses, like you said, like the internet just came on board, like people were
yeah,
like, what's this SEO stuff, and
yeah.
everyone had to figure it out themselves.
Yes,
And even
yes,
business,
exactly.
like people just had to like figure business out. Like, what was
Mm.
business about? What's
Oh,
the
I know. There was no
what's
mentors or coaching or YouTube videos, or it's just like, yeah.
Hmm. Whereas now, like, I follow a couple of brands like, the Diary of a CEO, for example. And then, if you look at some of the content there, if you only had that back then, to tap
Mm,
into, to kind of make you feel normal, like, oh, so that's what I'm going through, like I go
yeah,
through that stress.
yeah, no, absolutely.
And especially I think working from home, you were doing that, you were sort of running it from home and,
Yep,
looking
yep,
after
working
the
from,
kids as well. Mm.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I had a warehouse, but I also stored, product in my garage at home. So it was, yeah, very
Mm.
much a at home,
Mm.
yeah, business with the kids and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And how did you sort of have a stage where you were growing, and then you were kind of like storing this stuff in your house? and then you started to move to like a warehouse and distribution and
Yeah, so I actually started, I did start with a warehouse because I had Woolworths as my first sort of distribution channel.
Mm,
So they have extremely strict rules and regulations in terms of truck sizes, pallet sizes, all of that kind of stuff. So I had to,
mm,
get up to speed really quickly on um, how my product gets distributed to their warehouse, because if it's not exactly how they need it and in the right time slot, then they won't take your product.
mm,
So I set myself up with a warehouse from the get go. Again, because I had obviously significant numbers. I had thousands of products that were being just distributed around the country. So
mm.
yeah, I sort of had a good contract to start with, I suppose.
Yeah, no, and then that's what you need, and that's what sometimes e-commerce business owners need to know. It's like there's a balance between that wholesale market, direct to businesses like Woolies, fulfilling those big orders, and then the online revenue, which comes straight through the website as well.
Yeah,
What would you say was the distribution? I mean, obviously online probably wasn't as popular back then, but what was the sort of
yeah.
scale of distribution between online and through
Yeah,
the
look, I would
direct?
say, 95% through Woolworths plus my independent
Mm,
channels.
mhm,
And,
mhm.
I really looked at those as a bit of a loss leader and being more around sort of brand awareness, because I thought if people, could see them in the Woolworths store and they could trust that brand and,
Mm,
talk to their friends. I mean, that's a pretty influential phase in people's life stages. So, communicating that and then obviously coming to the website. So I was definitely getting, some great sales through the website. Which
mm,
was ideal because obviously that's where you get your greater margins, and you build that direct relationship with your end consumer as opposed to,
mm.
Woolworths. I was only just breaking even, and sometimes not even breaking even. But I was prepared for that, knowing that I wanted to have my
Mm.
product, out there for the awareness.
Yeah, 100%. And you get into this cycle of like having to fulfill these really massive orders. And that takes a lot of capital, right? Like as a small
Oh,
business,
absolutely.
you've got to invest in that capital to get the stuff manufactured, get it
Yeah.
shipped, move it across. And that comes off your back. Like Woolies is not going to, really help
Oh
you with
no,
that. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. They don't pay you
Yeah.
till after. So yeah, definitely. And I see that with a lot of small businesses that I work with as well. Like they get the inventory in, and they've got that much inventory, but their cash, the cash flow is low, and it's hard to
Mm,
invest in marketing when cash flow is low, but they've got truckloads of product there. So it's that whole process certainly for small businesses is really challenging, and balancing out ordering enough stock so that you're getting it at a good price because you're getting the volumes, but then how much do you have onshore, and then how quickly can you move that and still maintain your recommended retail price. So yeah, I
mm.
certainly had those experiences too. And then with COVID and then shipping and all of that, like that's just been another layer of complexity that I didn't have to deal with
Mm.
back then. I had pretty consistent. I knew how long the ship I would take from China and through customs and all that kind of stuff. So I was able to prepare for that.
Mm.
But I think that's been a lot
Yeah, there's a
harder
lot
for
of
our
that.
small businesses.
There's a lot of that logistic thinking involved and strategy around, getting it to the end point and what's all the little pieces that you got to put in place. So, I
Mm.
mean, that I'll just, while we're on that, there
Yeah.
are a lot of small businesses, as you know, that are very challenged by, dealing with these big brands like Coles and Woolies. And I know a few businesses as well. What
Mm.
if someone was sort of getting into this, getting, starting to get into this sort of type of business? What sort of tips do you think you could give them,
Do you
on
mean
how
in
to
terms of
approach it?
e-commerce, or getting into big stores
Dealing
and being
dealing
an
with
online
the
business?
dealing with the big brands like Woolies and Coles, because it can
Yeah.
be very challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, look, it absolutely can. What advice would I give them? I think that you need to be extremely prepared and well funded, in terms of, whatever rules, regulations, processes, systems they have. You have to fit in, with those. It's challenging in terms of, what shelf space do you get, and I'd always go into a store and have a look at where my product was, and was it fully stocked, and all of those kinds of things. And unfortunately, particularly now with shortage of labour, shelf space is moving and things that may not be getting, topped up on time. So I think to go in really with your eyes wide open, and understanding that it's probably a real brand awareness, brand partnership. Again, depends on what your product is and what your margins are. But they run promotions, and if they want you to do a discount, then again that back then that came off sort of at my bottom line. So I think it's fantastic for distribution and awareness, but really understanding your quantities, your logistics, your cost of goods. If you're going to do promotions, is there still money left in the kitty for you? They're probably the biggest things that I'd want somebody to be thinking about.
No, that's fantastic, and there's a lot of things to consider because it all sounds exciting in the beginning, but it can go down south very quickly.
Yes.
Okay, cool. On to the next one. So, I mean, you founded a business called With Small Business about three years ago.
Yep.
What's With Small Business about, and what do you do, and why did you start it up?
Yeah. So the reason I started this business was because I worked in big business and worked with agencies, and then being, my own sort of solopreneur, entrepreneur, and not really being able to access, agencies, media at the time, creatives, all of that sort of stuff. I went, wow, small businesses really aren't getting, that kind of support. And I decided, I worked with hundreds of small businesses after I sort of had my own business. I was working for somebody else, and I was doing all the sort of growth and digital strategy for all of these small businesses. And what I realized with working with all these small businesses is that they didn't really have what I call the foundations for their business in place. And, having run a small business, if I spend $1 or I'm spending $1 of somebody else's small business, I want to make sure that that dollar is returning. If it's not returning in sales, it's returning in insights. So I decided that I wanted to solve a sort of a pretty big problem for small businesses, which was really simplifying, e-commerce marketing or digital marketing for small business owners. Digital is only getting more complex. We've now got the whole AI tools coming out. And how does a small business owner decide, are they doing SEO? Are they doing email marketing automation? Should they do Google ads? Should they do Facebook ads? Should they be using AI tools? It's, I'm a marketer and I've been one for 30 years and it's complex for me. And so I went, how can I simplify marketing, digital marketing for small business owners so that they can do what they're great at with their products or services, but have a trusted resource that can support them and support their growth. So basically what we did was developed out what we call our e-commerce growth platform. So if you think about the thing it's probably most similar to is robo-advice for like financial planning. So you go along and you put in your, how old you are and, what are your assets and, do you have, high risk profile or whatever, do you want aggressive growth, etc. And then that tool actually gives you a financial plan, and it can also recommend, or you need to see somebody for your super, or you need to see an accountant, and potentially does those introductions. So if you think about that process and think about it from a e-commerce marketing perspective for small businesses, that's what our platform does. So we basically have a digital audit tool where people can go and answer multiple choice questions, and then depending on what they answer, it will then advise which areas that they need to focus on. And that component is aligned to my framework, which I'll talk about in a minute. But then once they get advice on, okay, now I know what I need to be focusing on, or at least the next 3 things that I need to be focusing on, I need somebody to help me do it. And so we built out a whole range of best practice toolkits, because there's lots of different ways to do lots of things in digital marketing, as I'm sure you know, Ez. And we really wanted to focus on how do we build the right foundations, for your brand, for your data, for SEO, looking at what your conversion rate is. Do you have the basic email marketing automations in place? So I built out the framework, and there's toolkits now. So you do an assessment, and then it goes, okay, these are the areas that you need to focus on. And then within the platform, you can either say, I want to do it myself, and all of the instructions are in there, Or you can say, can you get somebody to help me do this? And we've got like a trusted network that we can introduce them to execute the services. And that way they know what they're getting, because that transparency is really missing, I think, for small business owners. So it gives them the confidence and it gives them the transparency to know what they're asking for. And so whether they ask their own developer or their own agency, or whether they utilize our network, we don't really mind. We just want them to have the confidence and understanding of what they're actually getting done.
Yeah, I mean, look, I really relate to you in regards to, you sort of setting up the foundation for that small business owner. And it is often a common thing that we come across. So we work with a lot of startups and founders as well.
Yeah.
And, often the misconception with digital marketing, it's not so much like what you do, it's the priority. What do you do first? Like the foundation.
Yeah.
What is the foundation? And you kind of you'll go into a brand sometimes. We had a meeting today with a craft brew distillery here, just a local brewery here in Perth, and they're quite active organically on social, and they're doing all of this sort of active PR and touching base with the community and all of that sort of stuff. But then they're not really doing any paid advertising, for example. They've kind of reached this stage where they've got retail, they've got an online website, but they're not scaling. They're not scaling that revenue. They're just sort of sitting on this organic journey.
Yes.
And there's different stages,
which is
right?
great.
Yeah.
I mean, we love those businesses, don't we? Yeah, they're like, oh my God, good brand, good product, but lots of opportunity for growth.
Yeah. So this is like, okay, well, they've hit this stage. What do they do now? What's the next piece of what's the best channel for them? Is it SEO? Is it Facebook? Is it Google? And if they spend $1, what are they going to get back in return? How are they going to increase the revenue for their product line? All of this sort of stuff. How do they build their audiences online? Right, tapping into new audiences and acquiring new audiences from a local perspective, nationally. So, having these conversations and then working out what's the priority, because I think that's often the issue, is that, brands will get to a certain point and then someone might come along and go, oh, you need to rebuild your whole website, for whatever reason. And it's like, well, that's going to cost 20 grand or 15 grand or whatever. And then they've gone down that path and it's like, okay, well, we've built this site. It looks good, but now what? Now
we've run out of money. Now we can't actually invest in getting people to our website.
Correct. Yeah. So it's about that balance, isn't it? Like between, okay, how do we generate revenue? And then what do we do next? And I think that's often the confusing thing, especially with e-commerce and digital marketing.
Look, absolutely. I mean, I must say, with the hundreds of businesses that I've worked with, I would say that, right back to the bare basics where I talk about data. I mean, Google Analytics. I go, so, is your Google Analytics set up? Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, a developer connected it. And I go in and I go, oh my God, like there's nothing set up for e-commerce. They're not even gathering audience insights because they've literally just connected,
there's no e-commerce tracking. There's no e-commerce tracking. There's no transactions coming in.
Yeah, exactly. So I go, oh my God, please, can we do that first? Because without your data, you got your blindfold on, and digital is such a fantastic tool when you can actually see what is going on with people, where are they landing, how long are they staying there, where did they come from? So right back to, and that's where sort of my framework starts with, data being so important, and then, conversion rate optimization. Like, again, most small businesses I work with, they don't know what their conversion rate is. They know what their revenue is, or they know what their transactions are. And I go, if your conversion rate is 1 and you can get it up to 2, you are doubling your revenue without investing,
without spending more
money. That's right. So how do we look at pumping that up so that then when we're spending, in ads, that, we're really doing it more efficiently?
Yeah, 100%. No, I love your approach, and I think that's definitely what a lot of businesses need, is just clarity rather than selling a service, because it often depends on who you speak to, because you're kind of like a central advisor, right? Like you're not really focused on selling specific services. You just want them to get to the best possible point of success as quickly as possible. So,
Absolutely.
if they go and speak to an SEO agency, of course they're going to sell SEO. If they go
SEO.
and see a branding agency, of course they're going to sell them branding, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, it's very important to speak to someone that has more of a overview of everything versus,
Yeah,
like, oh,
and
you
look,
got to
all
do
of those,
this.
to your point, all of those channels are important, and it's that priority. So I think there's two things for small business. Number one is knowing what they, don't have in place that they can put in place, so that when they start,
Mm,
spending money in advertising, for example, that they're doing that efficiently. But it also really comes back to business objectives. So, we were talking earlier about, I've got my warehouse full of product. I can't spend the next 6 months increasing my conversion rate and working on my technical SEO. Like, I need sales, I need cash flow. And this is where we go, okay, well, what are those, bottom of funnel levers where people are in market searching for you right now, where we can get you that
mm,
revenue, so that, we can still work on obviously putting the other pillars in place, but we want to be,
mm,
again, making sure that whatever that advice is, that it's really matching, the business, objectives and
mm.
goals, and based on where they're currently at.
Yeah, so with the digital marketing, I mean, we often call that the low hanging fruit, right? Like, what's the stuff that's going to get the sales now?
Yeah.
Maybe more bottom of the funnel, people that we're already tapping into. How do we sort of tap into that a bit easier and more regularly on a constant basis, building up the
Yeah.
foundations, and
Yeah.
then setting up more complicated sort of ad targeting strategies at the top
Yeah.
of the funnel in the middle. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. And just with the small businesses, as if we dive deeper into these e-commerce businesses,
Hmm.
what do you think? What sort of support do you think that these businesses lack the most? Like, if they come to you,
Mm.
what are they? What's the support that they, are really sort of lacking in their business?
I think it's definitely what to do next. Like, they're getting articles, they're getting, they send me through emails from Facebook reps and Google reps going, "Oh, I'm your rep, meet with me." So uh, they have little trust, to be honest, in terms of
Mm,
digital marketing or digital advertising. Yeah, suppliers. All of the people that I've worked with have all been burnt in one way, or another. And so, it was really important for me that our advice is unbiased advice, and it's not about selling you wares and services, because I think that is the biggest gap. And with new platforms coming on like Upwork and Fiverr and sort of all of this gig
mm,
economy, again, there's amazing resources on there that are really, really talented, and you can get anything done for lots of different prices. But these small business owners, they don't know what they need. They don't know what they should be asking for, and they don't know how to brief somebody. So you might go, great, I get a technical audit done for $30, but how do you know that's what you need them to look at? And
mm,
so it's really that lack of confidence. They've all been burnt, and yeah, so it's definitely that trust aspect. And then just that transparency where they just go, "Oh my God, I just zone out because it's too complex." And it's that black box of digital marketing, giving them the confidence to go, "I can see what's in it." And usually when they see what's in it, they go, "I don't want to do it. Who can do it?" 90% of
mm,
95% of our members, as soon as they see what needs to be done and they've got confidence in what that is, they're just going, "Tell me who can do it," because I don't want to do it,
mm,
but they now know what it is, and they can see the value there for those services, which I think are
mm.
undervalued a bit at the moment based on their experiences.
Mm. And then there's also that the shiny new toy syndrome, right? Like, where there's with digital marketing, it seems like every week something new is coming along and changing the world.
Yes,
And
yes,
AI is a good example.
yeah,
And then it sort of really puts a bit of a obstacle course on the railway tracks for the business,
yeah,
because they're like, okay, well, what do I do now? Like, AI, do I start creating
yeah,
content,
yeah,
articles? Like, am I like increasing my efficiency really well? So there's a lot of things that are being thrown at the small
mm,
business owner, and especially for e-commerce as well. And then it's sort of, I guess, if you're providing advice saying, okay, well, yeah, this is coming, but it doesn't really affect you right now because of
Yeah,
this, and this. Or, yes, you can apply it, but if you're going to apply it from a content perspective, for example, or whatever,
that's
and that
right.
can
And
reduce
I
your cost.
literally just
Yeah.
published an article on, 9 ways to leverage ChatGPT for small business owners.
Mm,
So, I mean, that's the other thing that I do, which I love, and I love about our
mm,
industry, that there's always new apps, there's always new technology, there's always stuff, going on. And, what my ultimate dream is down the track is that, our platform is a global platform, with small businesses all around the world, and that all the new really cool tech that comes out, that we can test that with a small number of our small business owners and go, wow, this tool's really great, and either integrate it into our community or share it. There's lots of tools I
mm,
use online now, like free tools, and I include those in my what I call my e-commerce insights. So I sort of do a newsletter and just really trying to give them, that information. And to your point,
mm,
like Google Analytics 4. I've been talking about that for the last 18 months, obviously, and it's going to become even bigger, this year. So it's really
mm.
arming them, and I'll say, this is coming up. You don't need to worry about it now. Right now, I'm saying, this is coming up. If you haven't done anything in my last 3 newsletters, then you need to be doing something now. So
Yeah.
I try to cut through the craziness with that kind of
Mm-hmm.
support.
Yeah, so that goes to our next question, really. So it's good segue there, which
Mm-hmm.
is really, what are the new challenges in the future that you think small or e-commerce businesses will face? So obviously,
Yeah.
you talked about Chat GTP. We mentioned a bit of AI. You've also written 2 or 3 articles recently. So, I mean, is there a handful of things that really come to your mind that you would like to share, and we can make some good tips around? Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think, definitely digitalization has changed the way people think, the way they get influenced, the way they purchase, the way they, research products. And I think that's just going to continue more and more. Definitely the AI, side of things is going to have, a huge, impact in terms of how to integrate that into, digital advice. That's going to be an interesting space to see. But in terms of content generation and ideas, and arming you with that sort of information without having to do it from scratch, is obviously going to have a huge impact in terms of efficiencies for content. I think customer analytics, there's going to be some big changes there. We've obviously got the third party data, first party data. We've got a lot going on in terms of Google's change of platform, so the move from Universal Analytics to Google Analytics 4. So in terms of gathering that data and then analysing that data, I think is going to be a bit of a hairy one for small businesses, because at the moment the interface for GA4 isn't fabulous. And I'm very familiar with Universal Analytics. Most small business owners aren't even that familiar with that. I highly recommend that they be gathering their data in Google, because that's where you're going to start to do your deep, dives, your, cross devices, your, multi channels, your unique customer
Mm,
IDs, all of that kind of stuff. So that's going to be an interesting space. And I mean, data's the most, I would call it one of the keys to growth. Really, it's the gold in terms of finding out what's working, what's not working, and where the growth is for your business. So
mm,
I think that's a real area of focus, but it's going to be a real area of change.
mm,
And then I would say the whole sort of omni-channel, across both content and also across commerce. So, what is that integrated customer journey across multiple channels? So, if I am selling my product in Woolworths, what is that experience? If I buy it online, can I return it at Woolworths? How seamless is that brand experience, all the way from articles and ads and content through to return experiences, whether that be on or offline.
mm.
So I think that's also going to be an area where consumers are really going to expect a seamless process, and if they don't experience that, then they're going to have something to say about it. And I think for small businesses, there's going to be catching up to do, definitely, in terms of how to optimize that experience. Even that whole online, even if they're not retail, how long until the product gets delivered, and if people don't like it, when it comes back, and what's that return process, and are you going to charge me for that? And that whole component is definitely going to be another area, I think, that we need to keep our eye on.
No, that's fantastic. Really in depth and a variation of key topics there. And I think one of the things that you really hit the nail on the head was around visibility. If you talk about new challenges in the future, there's obviously a lot of new channels, for instance, TikTok, and then there's YouTube Shorts and stuff like that. And, there's always going to be some new sort of platform that's growing quite rapidly. But if you've got visibility over your analytics and your brand and GA and what's happening, from an organic perspective, from a paid perspective, from email data, and if you've got all these channels and you've got visibility across everything, if you want to try new channels, if you want to try new strategies, you can at least see what's working and what's not working. And it all comes back down to that visibility piece and data pieces, which is what you're really pushing, which I love. Yeah. Fantastic.
And that's why, when I talk about that dollar, spend getting a return, I mean, often clients that I work with, I say, look, yes, we're investing in advertising, but we're not going to just go, if we're working with somebody, it's not about going and spending your budget. It's going, okay, what are we going to learn from this, so that when we find sort of our formula, that we can then, plug the money in and be getting that effective return.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. Finally, what's one piece of advice that you would offer, to an e-commerce business owner? And it could be something that's quite, effective in terms of what they're going through on a personal level. It could be, technical, whatever, what's, share with us some of the sort of the deep advice that you feel that you could provide them.
Well, look, I'm not usually one for plugging myself or my products, but what I would say is that all the businesses that I've worked with, when they understand the e-commerce growth framework, they feel that they can see a roadmap and have confidence in where they're going. So I did write my book last year and published it on Amazon, called the e-commerce growth framework. So for under $12, you can get the Kindle version there, and it will give you absolute clarity on that path and where you should be focusing on. So it's a really practical book, and it asks lots of questions that you can basically audit your business yourself and go, okay, now I understand this, now I know where I'm at, and now I know what I need to do. I did write the book because I have the greatest respect for, small business owners, their passion, their hard work, their blood, sweat and tears. They really do drive the global economy, and I really wanted to support them. And that's why I wrote the book. The other thing that they can do is, if they do go to withsmallbusiness.com, I have a starter membership, which is free. And you do get access to me on the platform, and you also get access to the e-commerce growth framework on the website. So again, it's just, I'd love them, just even if they're doing it for free, but just to at least set them up, and then they go, okay, now I know what I should be asking my developer about Google Analytics. Now I know that I need to do a technical SEO audit, because I don't know when the last one was done, and I don't even know if, I'm failing the Google's Core Web Vitals assessment, which basically means you won't be ranking for SEO. So, I just want to help and support them get confidence and sort of get on that path. So they're the resources that I have, out there for them. If they didn't want to use any of those things, I would say, planning is really, really important, as well as utilizing digital to test and learn. So make a plan based on what you already know, have some hypotheses, use your website, use your socials, use your advertising, use your analytics to, test and learn. And that the gold, it is there if you can invest the time and or money in, understanding what it's trying to tell you.
Mm. Well, thank you, Claudia. That's amazing, and I think you've got a wealth of knowledge when it comes to online marketing and e-commerce, and you've got first-hand experience. You've done the hard yards.
Yes.
um, you've dealt with Woolworths and so forth. So,
Yes, yes.
yeah, no, it's brilliant, and you've grown a business, sold it, written a book now. It's on Amazon, so we will try and promote that as well.
Oh,
And
thank you.
yeah, I think really it's quite an exciting time, I feel, because there's a lot of unknowns,
Mm.
but then there's a real shift and trust towards online purchasing. So
Yeah.
I think the culture of I think there's a stat which I've said this a few times, but like there's a stat where I think in Australia or alone, I think it's less than 10% of all retail e-commerce.
Yep.
So so much growth, right? Like people think that online retail is huge, but it's
Yeah.
actually a lot more smaller than what people think. So it
Yeah.
just shows you
Interesting.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, another
Yeah.
five
I
years to
did
go
see.
before, yeah.
Yeah, there is a statistic out there from Statista, which is, yeah, by 2040 that 95% of all purchases, will be done online. So,
Mm,
ride the wave. It's only more people are going to get on there and get confidence, and
mm,
yeah, and you've got to get in there. You've got to hold the line. You've got to, yeah, stick
yeah.
to your game, and
And
um,
I'm sure your book will be a bestseller by then, Claudia. So
woo!
fingers crossed. Okay,
Yeah,
fantastic.
hopefully.
Awesome. Well,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Great to have you on the show, and yeah, love to connect again. And yeah, once again, thank you. And we will share your details and your links to
Yeah,
your
thank
website
you. I've
to
just
do the
relaunched.
framework. Mm.
Yeah, thank you. I've just relaunched the site as well. So yeah, I'd love to share. Yeah, the podcast, the interview. It's been such a pleasure to be on with you and talk about things that I love. So
Fantastic. All right. Thanks, Claudia.